unless we can convince ourselves that the Ten Commandments have been done away with or abrogated in some sense or changed in some sense, then we must concede that the Sabbath is part of the Ten Commandments. But going back to the Sabbath being or understanding and knowing the will of God, there's a couple of scriptures that come to mind that really hit home, and one of them is Matthew. This is the Lord speaking himself here in Matthew 7:21. He says, "Not everyone that says unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that does the will of my Father in heaven." And when we wonder, okay, well, maybe the Lord's will is just for us to do good and to shun sin and shun evil. And shunning sin and shunning evil is correct, and that is part of it. And when you really look down and understand what shunning sin and shunning evil are, they are the fulfillment or the keeping, really, of the Ten Commandments is the shunning and the avoiding of sin and evil. Psalms 40 verse 8 says, "I delight to do thy will, O God, yea, thy law is within my heart." So clearly the psalmist believed that doing the will of God was keeping the law, keeping the Ten Commandments. And so that's my take on at least understanding and knowing the Lord's will. So
I completely agree with your statements. I've come across a lot of different individuals in my walk of life talking about the law of God in itself. And a lot of people have been saying, the law to the cross. And is that necessarily true? Is the law of God nailed to the cross of Jesus Christ? When we examine both the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, and we examine the New Testament, and we apply the principle of hermeneutics, we actually see that this statement is false. For example, I'll give a quote here from F.C. Gilbert, and it states this: "The law and the gospel are intimately connected. They are closely associated. If the divine law had never been transgressed, there would have been no need of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Since the basis of God's government and authority is the immutable law, i.e. the Ten Commandments, when this divine code was violated, a remedy for sin had to be essential. Thus, we have the saving grace of God and his only remedy, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ." To think about considering this is Psalms chapter 119, verse 142, where it states this: "Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth." Now, how do we match this up with the New Testament? It says this: Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And when we combine this with Revelation chapter 14, verse 12, we see it says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus Christ." To give an example of how this applies, consider the children of Israel. Back in the Old Testament times, the children of Israel had God come before them, and lightning, thunderings, and all manifested miracles happening when they were in the land of Egypt. They had the commandments of God given to them. But when we look at the book of Hebrews, we see that they did not combine this with faith. And without faith, you cannot please God, according to the Scriptures. So how do we combine this to our day? In our time period now, people claim to have faith in God. People claim to believe in God, but they do not wish to keep God's commandments. But according to the principle that we stated for hermeneutics, we find out that Revelation 14 gives us the plain view that the commandments of God have not been abrogated, and the faith of Jesus Christ helps us to actually become more obedient to God. As it states, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." So quick question, Mike. Why is the Sabbath commandment important?
Well, I would have to say there's a number of really good answers to that question. I would start with saying that it has really been, for the most part, throughout all of the nation of Israel's existence, primarily starting with Abraham, up until the close of the Hebrew or the nation of Israel's opportunity, so to speak, to be a nation of priests for the Lord. All through that time period, the Sabbath was always a test that the Lord used to determine who his true followers would be versus those who would choose not to follow his will and his law. And that's what I would have to say is the first answer that comes to my mind. There are several other very good reasons. One is that when we read, I believe it's in Revelation 7, verse 2, it talks about the seal of God, and it talks about, and correct me if I'm wrong on that verse, pretty sure it's Revelation 7, but it talks about the angels holding the four winds of strife and not releasing them until all the servants of his God have been sealed in their foreheads with the seal of God.
Correct, Revelation 7, you're right.
So my understanding and in my study of what that seal is fascinating. It really is a huge subject, but to boil it down, I would have to say that the seal of God is the law of God, and it is in fact, Deuteronomy, and in several places when it talks and it speaks about the Ten Commandments, it says, they shall be as a template between thine eyes and, as bound upon thy wrists, and so on. And referring to the fact that really they should be constantly on our mind all throughout our day, and really everything that we do, referencing to the hand, should be in the mind and in keeping with the Ten Commandments and with the law of God. So I believe the law of God is the seal of God that Revelation chapter 7 refers to. And then when we look even more specifically, the Sabbath day or the Sabbath commandment contains what would be known in the world of antiquity as a seal of so to speak, they would use on old documents between if an official, a royal official or a king or government official were to send a message to another government official and did not want that message to be changed or altered, wanted to verify its authenticity, they would, at the end of that message, they would put a seal. They would basically use, in some cases it was hot wax, and in some cases it was soft clay, but they would seal that message with the wax or the clay, and then they would, in a sense, they would push their signet ring into that clay or that wax, which contained basically three elements. It contained their name, their territory, and then their authority. And when you look at the fourth commandment, out of all the commandments, interestingly enough, although it's the commandment the predominant Protestant Christian world seems to want to forget, it's the only commandment that starts with the word remember. But in reading the fourth commandment, it says, "But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not do any work in it. For in 6 days," and I'm summarizing a little bit here, it says, "For in 6 days Jehovah made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day, and hallowed it." And the fourth commandment is, again, the only commandment that contains all three elements of the seal or a seal as would be found in antiquity. The Lord, his name, made his office as creator, and then 3 would be heaven, and sea would be his territory. And so, again, if this is the test, and, I believe I'd have to go back and in fact, maybe I'll include these scriptures in the show notes, but it's either Deuteronomy, I think it's in Exodus, where it says in a few places that the Sabbath day would be a sign, a perpetual sign, meaning eternal, throughout all the generations